Dagens avsnitt är sponsrat av GameTown, Stockholms första cowork för spelutvecklare. Och det här tycker jag känns som ett superspännande initiativ. I fastigheten Fatburen på Södermalm på Magnus Ladulåsgatan så ligger det alltså GameTown där ett antal olika små spelstudios samlas och jobbar var för sig men använder de gemensamma utrymmen och kommer träffas och ha jättemycket spännande sociala och kreativa utbyten. Jag tror att tittar vi i framtiden så kommer det säkert komma jättemycket intressant ur detta. Dessutom så ligger det i närheten av många andra spelföretag. Bara inom en radie på ett par 100 meter så kan man hitta Paradox, Avalanche, DICE, Epic, Star Stable, Fat Shark, Outsiders med flera. Så om du själv är spelutvecklare och tycker det här låter intressant så tveka inte, kolla in gametown.se för mer information. Och nu bor jag själv inte kvar i Stockholm, men hade jag gjort det så hade jag definitivt tittat på att sitta på GameTown. Men nu tar vi och lyssnar på dagens avsnitt.
Vi är spelskaparna.
Välkommen till Spelskaparna, podcasten om personerna bakom spelen. With me today I have Shailesh Parbhu. He's a senior game designer who has worked for Swedish AAA companies such as Sharkmob and Embark. He has also run his own gaming studio back in India, where he made mobile games and DS games. And he has worked with hyper-casual games for FRVR. And today's topic will be AAA versus indie life. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
To start off, how did you end up in the industry?
I think I first realized I wanted to make games when I played Day of the Tentacle back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw the beautiful credits roll that game has. And I think I was 14 or 15 and kind of realized, you can get paid to make games. People actually make games as a living. And I would want to do that. But I was in India and I didn't really know how to go about it. So I tried lots of different approaches and eventually ended up with game design. That became my thing.
Okay, but it's hard to start off with game design. Did you have other people that you had a team with, or what was the start?
Yeah, so actually I studied computer science, programming and stuff. And we did a couple of school projects. And I can program a little bit, but I wouldn't call myself a proper programmer. I also tried doing art and I can doodle and draw a little bit, but I wouldn't call myself a proper artist either. And somehow I always ended up being the person in every group who was kind of figuring out what we're doing. And eventually, as I was teaching myself from the internet, I learned about the discipline of game design and sort of figured out that that's where I fit in, I guess.
Got it. We're probably gonna, during this talk, come back to some of your earlier work, but how did you end up here in Sweden?
Yeah, so I worked for a few companies in India initially in my career, and then at some point I decided to start my own company back in India, and I ran that for almost 10 years. And during that time, I was traveling a lot to basically promote the games that we were working on, look for publishers or meet platform holders. So I used to come to Nordic Game a lot, and I made a lot of friends here, both in Copenhagen and Malmö. And it was just really nice because a lot of the kind of games we wanted to work on, there were a lot of people in this part of the world who were working on stuff like that. And it was so easy to have conversations with them about those things on a semi-regular basis, which is something that was really difficult in India because in my opinion, there were 10 to 15 developers whose work was interesting and was stimulating to, that you could have these conversations with. So that would happen once in a year in India. It just felt like home here, I guess, in that sense. So I wanted to move here for a few years, for a while. And then eventually I got an opportunity in Copenhagen to work for a mid-sized studio. And that's when I decided to move, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's begin with this topic, AAA versus indie life. So the most recent company you worked at was Embark, which is a AAA company. If we have to start off, what is the difference, like as an employee working for a indie company or a AAA company?
I think it's interesting because, outside the industry, nobody really knows or cares what AAA is, right? And I think even within the industry, the definitions are quite murky. Embark obviously does very high quality stuff. I don't know if by many counts, people would be like, but that's not a AAA studio. It's only 200, 300 people. AAA should be 1,000 people. Or like, there's so many metrics of how you qualify something as AAA when the definition is super murky. But I think in general, like, I feel like AAA companies are usually much bigger in team sizes and budgets. And if you go by that definition, I feel like when you're working in a AAA studio, because of the way productions happen in very big teams, it's very easy to feel like you don't have much of an impact or much of a role in the sense of like, what is your impact on the product you're making? What did you affect? What changes did you affect to it? It's a very infrequent feeling that you get in AAA. But in smaller teams and in indie teams, it's almost like a daily thing. Like everything you do has a direct impact and you can see it and you can feel it. And I think that's why personally I find that motivating. And that's probably why I feel like a bit more inclined towards doing stuff in smaller teams or like indie teams.
Got it. For me, I've never worked like at a big studio. It seems like magic to me that you actually get the result. I mean, just the sheer amount of people seems very hard to manage. But I mean, there are amazing stuff being made by AAA companies as well. Like from your experience, now you said that it tends to be a bit slow and hard to get an impact. But how do they manage to actually get a result?
My personal opinion is like, I don't think we as an industry have really figured out how to do AAA-sized productions in a good way. Obviously, I haven't worked at that many AAA studios, but I have worked in some, and I've also like interacted with a lot of friends and people who work in many other AAA studios. And I feel like I hear the same stories everywhere. It's like, nobody really truly understands what's happening. Nobody really truly understands what they should do. Very often, projects are just kind of sprawling out in all directions like a shapeless entity. And eventually someone cuts through the dough with like the mass of dough with like a cookie cutter and then ships a game from that. And it just feels inefficient and ungainly. I think we as an industry really don't really understand how to do this in a good way.
Do you mean like a lot of stuff being made is wasted in a big studio?
Yeah, I think some of it definitely is wasted. And a lot of effort and energy is wasted in trying to constantly recalibrate people into what they should be doing. If you sit two people in a room and try to get them to look at the same piece of information, they will have different takes on it.
Yeah.
But imagine if you were doing that with 1,000 people in a creative endeavor. Like, there are thousands of opinions of the same game being made, thousands of variations, and everybody's working on their variation of it. How does one truly unify that into shipping a meaningful product? I'm not quite sure we know how to do that.
Yeah, to have like a shared vision.
Yeah. And I know that directors try to be the people who do that, and then it trickles down from there. But even with that, I feel like it's still something that's not working quite well, I think, personally, my opinion in the industry is like how to get people to be on board the same vision and actually work towards that goal and actually ship something in an efficient manner towards that goal.
But I mean, yeah, just to take it to its extreme, you're not saying that there are no good AAA games.
No, I'm not saying that. I mean, I love some AAA games, but also, for example, I love From Software games. I guess they're AAA.
Yeah.
For this conversation, yes.
For
For some measures, yes. But there will be people who will be like, no, that's not AAA. Their animations are not cinematic enough. Or, I've heard arguments like that from people in the industry.
Do you know like roughly the team size?
Actually, no, I don't.
Probably in the hundreds, right?
Definitely it feels like, but I don't know for sure. I would be super surprised if it was less than 100 people in those games. But we can actually quickly look up. 397 people. So roughly 400. Maybe it was lesser when they did Dark Souls or Demon Souls. But Elden Ring, maybe 400. But I would say it's AAA, right? Like,
and as I said, I think like for this discussion, it's definitely AAA.
Also, Nintendo, for example, they probably don't care whether they're qualified as AAA or not. But would you call them AAA?
I mean, they are very polished and nice, but they tend to like, in some sense, have a smaller scope. Like the scope for it being as fun as possible is big, but for like the graphics to be realistic or stuff like that, it's usually not like their aim.
Yeah, they don't care about realistic graphics for sure. But like Zelda had an immense scope, like Breath of the Wild had a huge scope. So I don't know, like it's so murky with what is even AAA. That's another discussion. But let's for this discussion say that maybe we can agree that Nintendo's not AAA, I guess, or
no, exactly, no. But do you think like so I would imagine that if I had like 200 people at my disposal and I was going to make one game, I would think that it would be good to choose a game and a design that would be possible to break up in many smaller pieces, because then essentially like you could have small teams working on those different pieces, but then like that would affect the type of game you make a lot. Because if you have a game that is big and it needs to be consistent, very consistent among all of those people, then for me it seems very complicated to get it. The problem with the shared vision. But if we take, what's your favorite From Software game?
I would say Sekiro probably.
I haven't played it, but I suppose that is a game that would be hard to break up, right? Like, yes, if we think about it.
Actually, no, I think you could break up most From Software games into like neat little things for smaller teams to work on. I think their combat is pretty systemic. Like there is some logic behind how the player experiences it, and then you can obviously design those systems or like design bosses keeping those rules in mind. I guess the dungeons or like their exploration areas would be similar. Yeah, I think you could divide them into neat little compartments.
And you could think of like something that is on a higher level, which is the shared vision that you could, like all of these teams would know about that. So it still feels consistent.
Yeah, I think clearly that I feel they're getting some parts right for sure. But I wonder what it is. I've heard numerous stories about Japanese game direction being very, in some ways, holistic and like kind of, what did they say? What do they call it when it's example driven or...
Example driven?
Yeah, like, I don't know. I heard this story about like how, I don't know if it's true. I heard that the game director for Demon Souls, Miyazaki, probably should say Miyazaki-san. I don't know. I heard that for the From Software multiplayer direction was that, when I'm driving down the highway and I see someone having a flat tire and they're parked by the side trying to change wheels, it's a little bit like that. I can choose to stop and help them, or I can just keep going on with my own things. And that's like the problem statement that is given to solve with the direction, as the direction. And then they have solved it in the way they have. When you play the games, you see these signs of people who want help, and then you can choose to go in and help them or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting way, because it gives you the experience, that it conveys the experience that you want the player to feel. And then the developers have had the freedom to actually realize it, I guess.
It's a pretty loose requirement, but still like also you can check if do we have this, have we completed this mission or not. Like,
yes. I guess it's trying to give the emotion and experience as the goal rather than the specifics of a feature, or, like, oh, it needs to have a flare gun, and then you will shoot a flare, and then somebody will see it, and like it's.
Have you experienced like the opposite, or very explicit requirements? Like,
oh yeah, most certainly. I think that's the easiest thing to do, probably, where a lot of direction will end up being very micromanagey, and I guess it's kind of only natural because the budgets are so high, the stakes are so high, probably the pressure on everybody is pretty high. So then people think, they want to minimize whatever could go wrong. And then I guess it's only natural people would try to end up doing that. But I think what it'll end up doing is it'll end up alienating your team, and it'll end up giving you worse results because you cannot have eyes on every feature and everything at the same time. And you cannot know the best solution for every mechanic organically. You cannot know the best solution for every mechanic because you will not be working on every mechanic at all times. So I guess keeping it a bit experiential is probably better.
Yeah. I suppose like if you are explicit, it feels like you would get faster to a result, but that result is more probable to be bad.
Yeah, or it's more probable to only know a part of the story, or only do something that you already know is possible from other things, but it may not be the best solution coming organically from what you're working with, because you're not actually doing the hands-on stuff. You don't know the specifics of what's happening with that. And then you might end up just having to do a very run-of-the-mill implementation rather than something unique being born out of the thing you're doing.
Yeah, so and like almost by definition, if you are like an indie title with a small team, then you tend to work in a more organic way because you will see everyone all the time, or like everyone will be very close to the entire product, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you are indie, since everybody kind of knows all the problem statements because it's there for everyone to see and everyone to discuss and everyone to talk about, I think more solutions can come out from the thing organically that you're working on.
And then it's more likely that it's something that is more unique coming from indie games.
Yeah, or even if it's not unique, it's more likely for it to be a better fit. Like it doesn't always have to be unique. If it's like a really good fit for what you're doing, that's fine, right? But sometimes you don't end up having to forcefully fit something on that doesn't actually go together.
I feel like something that's very common with like AAA titles is that they use the bigger budgets and having more people to just make the game bigger, like scale it up, like it's 1,000 worlds or like a very big map or like 250 quests and it's like working with like quantity essentially, which for me is, I don't have that much time and so on. It's not that, as a player, it's not that interesting. I mean, sometimes it's really cool stuff, but that part, like the scaling up, is I don't find it that appealing. Is that like on the companies you've worked on, was there a theme of like scaling up?
I do have some stories, some pretty crazy stories talking exactly about what you're talking about. Scale first, everything else kind of almost comes later. And I think those are extremely scary situations to be in because you're building immense amounts of content without knowing if your core is strong enough to sustain it. And you're right. I have seen it, and also secondhand and firsthand in AAA quite a lot. And I'm not sure why that happens. Maybe some people really don't understand how to make games. I don't know. Or maybe that is the best way to make a AAA game. I don't know.
It's at least a way to divide the labor among many people.
Yeah. My feeling is it actually comes from the fear that, okay, we have 1,000 people. We need work for all of them. What are they going to do? So we need stuff for them to do. Let's just make stuff now. But I feel like there can be a better way to go about it rather than just saying we're going to have 250 types of cars in this game or whatever. Like, I'm just making up some random example, but rather you can obviously like look at doing experimentations on different sides of, across all disciplines, and like seeing, okay, what kind of, the art can do, what kind of fidelity we want, what kind of rendering we want, gameplay can do, what kind of core mechanics we want. And then I wish it was not about breadth of content first, as often as I fear it sometimes is.
But do you know if there is examples of if when Pixar makes a movie, they're usually like for maybe the first 2 years during the writing the script, during that process, it's very few people involved, and then they scale up the production when they essentially know like this is what we're going to build. If there are examples of that process, I mean, you could make like even of a game of a huge scale, you could have like a small team make basically the prototype and maybe do that for a couple of years or something. And then you call in a lot of more people to make all of the content when you know that we actually have something that is fun and would be possible to scale up.
Yeah, I think I've seen both of those kinds of productions. I definitely think that is a better way to go. Have a smaller team, figure out the base things that make your game cool, whether it's cool art or whatever it may be. Start with smaller scale experimentation and grow when you know more, rather than start with lots of people and invent stuff for them to do in a haphazard manner. I think that, yeah, but I've seen both sides of that. And I can say that starting small and growing organically better is much better. It also obviously has its own challenges. I think people who come later on in that cycle will feel less creatively enabled, or less, they will have less room for experimentation because a lot of the things will already be, figured out. But at the same time, there will be clarity in goals and deliverables, because, a lot of times we'll talk a lot about like burnout, and, burnout in the industry is super common. And there's like crunch and crazy deadlines, but also like a big factor to like burnout is not just crunch. And yes, those are also pretty bad contributors to it, but also like uncertainty in what is expected of you can lead to burnout as well. Like constant living in like, what do people want me to do? Do they want me to make a shooter or a platformer? What do they want? And so, maybe that can be both good and bad, the certainty, I guess. Knowing what to deliver can be both good and bad, but I guess it's another flavor.
Got it. We have talked about a lot of drawbacks with like AAA life, but to be a bit more nuanced, like from your experience, what are like positive things of working in a AAA studio?
I mean, the obvious one is stability, at least in this part of the world. Having a full-time job at a AAA studio is relatively stable. It's not like you would be fired as easily as in some parts of the world. So yeah, definitely having a stable paycheck and, all the employment benefits is the most obvious plus side of being in a bigger company. Because in indie, everything is uncertain, including your finances and, where your next paycheck is coming from, or if you even have a next paycheck, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. But what about like if someone is listening, maybe it's a student or something studying game design, do you think it's better to start off at your first job working on an indie game or going for a AAA title?
That's a tricky one. I think the first thing to do is to really think about why you want to make games. What about it do you enjoy? Do you enjoy like producing content? Do you enjoy experimenting? Do you want to do cool experimental stuff, or do you want to work on like high fidelity? Like, I think there's a lot of factors that will go into that decision. Obviously, how much you value stability. Do you have loans? All of these things should factor into that. And it's hard to say. I guess my tip there would be to like really know what you're after and what you need, and then decide accordingly, like whether AAA is a better fit or indie, I guess. But it's dangerous to be in one and expect it to work like the other, because that's not going to happen.
And what about like the role, like being a game designer? How is that, like that specific role, how is that different if you work on a indie studio or a AAA studio?
I guess it can vary a lot among AAA studios as well. and also indie studios, I guess. But I think in general in indie studios, you do a lot more. You fill in whatever gaps you can. But in many AAA studios, like you only do what you are sort of like hired to do. So many times, I know some AAA studios where you never really do any coding or any scripting or anything like that. But in indie, it would be pretty common for everyone to get their hands dirty, so to speak, a little bit at least.
Let's pretend that you are working on a GTA kind of game, and in one case it's made by an indie studio, and in one case it's made by a AAA studio. And as a game designer, could you just give one example of, let's say you are working on like when you steal a car and how that works and what you can do with your car. How would you work with that in an indie studio, and how would you work with that if you were in a AAA studio?
It's a fair enough question. I just wonder, I wonder if someone would make a GTA game as an indie.
Maybe you go back and if you do it like 2D and
exactly.
You could scope it down in ways.
Yeah. I think my feeling is that in a AAA setting, you would end up having to have a lot of meetings trying to get buy-in for this feature where you can steal cars. You would have to make
like politics almost.
Almost like politics. You'd have to like get buy-in of like directors above you, teams working with you, unless the idea is coming from above where a director tells you, oh, we need this feature in the game. And then you have to like convince your peers that this is a good idea. And then you, I don't know, sometimes have to make presentations about why this is a good idea and like how you could realize it, different ways of realizing it, collect ideas from a bunch of people you're working with, then like pitch to the producer, like this is what you need to prototype this feature. Then you get approval or you don't get approval for it. And then you have a kickoff meeting with this team, and then you like assign, then, you know, everybody gets tasks to prototype it, then you prototype it, you test it. But yeah, in an indie studio, it would move much faster. Like if you and your team think it's a good idea, you already just like, oh, I'm gonna just do this quick thing where I can move the character controller over to the car, and then you're just driving the car and like using whatever wonky physics thing. And then, you know, someone else says, yeah, okay, you do that and I'll do this other thing. And then 2 days later, you're already trying it out. And, you know, so I think the approach is very different in the sense of like, there's a lot of stuff outside of like just going into the engine and just hacking together something. Whereas there's a lot of like people management, there's a lot of like documentation, and obviously you probably need a lot of documentation as well, because there's so many people working on the project. People need to know what's happening. So it's almost like a side effect of being so many people. So there's obviously going to be a lot more outside of design and programming tasks.
Presumably in a AAA company, you should have access to like more competence or more skills, since there's like so many people. Is that something that you have seen as like a benefit?
It can be, yeah. I think it depends a little bit on what your ambition, what you exactly want to do. Like, I think AAA, yeah, as you said, like there are a lot more specialists in AAA who will do specific things for you. Whereas many times in many teams, in indie teams, everything either ends up on one of the two people on the team. So, you know, everybody's a generalist to some extent. And then obviously that will change. Doesn't have to, because some people are really good. Even though they're generalists, they can still give an output sometimes that's as good as or can even surpass some specialists. But it is like an easier thing. If you want to do super specialized things in a really good way, you know who to go to talk to, and then they will help you with it. So it can be a merit, but it depends on if that's what's important to you or your game. Like, if you don't care about like having the most perfect reflections on the surface of water, then maybe you don't need to worry about it, and you can hack it in a way that looks kind of like water, which is good enough for the game, and that's fine as well, right?
Do you think, it's clearly you can move fast and like try out many things that's better in an indie studio. But do you think there is a risk with, since everybody is generalists and everybody is more involved in the product, it's also like harder to kill your darlings in a sense? Like in a AAA studio, you can have like a producer who's very far away from the engine and doesn't really feel the same connection to something, can be more ruthless. Like, to be able to ship, we need to just cut this entire thing.
This is very interesting you say this, because in theory, I agree this is what should happen, right? Yeah. In theory, I agree. But in practice, I have seen the exact opposite. I've seen indies are way more happy to see, oh, wow, this is really not working. Let's scrap it and let's try something else. But I do feel like in AAA, there is more a chance of sunk cost fallacy, in the sense that people feel like we've invested a year in this feature. It's almost impossible to cut now because we've invested so much time and money into it already. We have to make it work. And I see people cutting features in AAA much less than in indie. Or if they do cut features in AAA, it's most likely happening at the very end, where the game is like not really coherent and someone comes in and says, well, we need to make something coherent out of this sprawling group of features. And then they gotta, someone makes those hard calls. But I do feel like on a day-to-day basis, I feel much less stuff gets cut in AAA.
Yeah, and it's more part of the process in the like the early on branches, basically, because you try so much and then you kill things that didn't work.
Exactly, because also because you have limited resources, everything you work on needs to be worth spending time on as an indie. So you're more likely to test early, it's not working, move on, do something else that's working. Because you have more room, I think you entertain the idea a lot more in AAA for much longer. Let's see. And then by soon you find yourself, you're at a point where you've invested too much for you to easily be able to say that, let's cut it. Also, many times it could be that you or a certain group of people are working on this feature, and if you cut this feature, then what are you going to do on the team? Maybe that fear also doesn't allow people to cut stuff in AAA so often. I mean, of course, you will find other stuff to do on the project, but maybe you don't think about it.
It could be even if someone way down in the organization feels that this feature isn't working, they might be a bit afraid of telling that, because...
Yeah, and also I feel I don't know about every AAA studio, but I don't know if very many people are enabled enough to make that decision. I don't know if a programmer in a AAA team or even a designer in a AAA team can just say that, well, this feature is not working, let's cut it. I'm not sure, actually.
But I mean, everyone can have an opinion, or what they feel in their gut.
most certainly, yeah.
Have you worked on something that you felt that for a long time, this is not working?
Yes, most definitely. And I have also made my voice clear that this needs to be changed or cut. And I guess that was not appreciated, maybe. I don't know. People did not like that I had opinions.
Got it.
Of the sort.
I think we're nearing the end. And I have one more question that is not about AAA and indie. So before we leave that, is there something you want to add before we move on?
I think generally I don't mean this to be AAA is bad or indie is bad or AAA is good or indie is good or anything. I think I've had a very varied career where I've worked on everything from mobile, AAA, AA, indie, mid-tier indie. And I think personally for me, smaller teams have been more fulfilling. But I just want to clarify that I think different things work for different people. So, going back to that question you asked earlier, it's identify what you want to do and, go after which scale in the spectrum would fulfill that for you, I guess.
Got it. As a last thing, if you were going to design a new game, you mentioned can be more interesting with indie, making something that doesn't have to be unique, but something that fits. What type of project would be motivating you for making a new game?
Personally, for me, I would like to do something a little bit more experimental, something unique, but that can take different forms. And also, I feel like if I work with someone, I always believe like everybody should be sort of in on what we're doing. Like people should have input. So I don't think I can say for sure that this is what I will do because I don't know yet. But I feel like personally, motivating for me is like doing something a bit more experimental.
Could you give an example of an existing game that would have been motivating to work on, or like something that inspired you? Like,
I really loved Return of the Obra Dinn, for example. Also Outer Wilds, really loved it.
so if you haven't played the Return of Obra Dinn, it's a game where there is a ship where everybody in the crew disappeared or died, and you are walking around and are supposed to find out how they disappeared or died, and how it happened, and you get to relive like the memories and you get to walk around in a frozen second or something like that. And it's a lot of fun, almost like Cluedo kind of game in a sense.
It was interesting in the sense that it was a game where you didn't really have so much to affect what was happening. You were mostly an observer and you had to figure out who those things were happening to. I think it was pretty unique in that sense that I guess it was a puzzle game where you were figuring out identities, right? Like, so it's a deductive kind of game, but was presented in a really nice way. And I felt the mechanics were really cool. Also, I really loved the fact that it was a game that you had to play with a pen and paper on your side and take notes and actually really put work into solving it. And I remember doing that also when I was much younger, playing like early point and click adventures, also like taking notes. I must remember I have to go and do this.
I did the same.
Yeah, and it kind of, maybe that's why I felt like a little bit more charmed by it as well, like having to I have to take notes because there's no way I can remember this.
I think I saw, this is only part of it, but there is a menu system where because you're identifying people and you pick who was this and what happened.
Yeah.
And I just saw like some YouTube video or something about just how much effort was put into that menu, which is something that you don't really, when you play it, it seems like a small thing, but then of course it's not obvious to get that right. It takes time. I also like, because it's also like a narrative in the game, but it's very much broken up to pieces. You get to, from the beginning, you don't understand anything at all because you just get to see some segment of the story. And then while playing and while paying a lot of attention into very small details, you kind of understand the bigger picture of the story. And there are movies and literature told in a similar way, but I think video games are even a better media for that type of story, which you tell in segments, because you can replay them and you're also entertained by the mechanics. So it's okay that it's a bit slow and not engaging the story all the time, which I think is cool.
Yeah, it's very true. I almost feel like when I played it, it felt to me, and I'm not sure if it's true, but it felt like I had never played anything that did that well, any game that did that. Maybe there was, but there are more and more now that want to do that kind of stuff, break down the story and you unravel it as you play the game, which was very special.
Yeah. It's been great talking to you, Shailesh. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.